Okay, so today we're going to be talking about going to meet the man, and I'm doing it in my car, so hopefully the lighting isn't too bad. I have to say, the beginning of the story was probably the most interesting opening to a story we have had in this class so far. Um, so let's dive right in. Basically, the first scene is just talking about how this guy has erectile dysfunction and he's trying to have sex with his wife, and really interesting because we get a simile, we get a couple similes here and there, but let's talk about the meat. Let's see. So he starts talking about how black, like the only thing that can get him like sexually aroused is thinking about black girls, and how he could never ask his wife to do the same things that he would ask a black girl to do. So there's a couple things there. First, this story has a lot of dehumanization, talking about black people as if they were lesser than white. So obviously, him saying that he would never ask his wife to do the sort of thing that a black woman he would ask to do kind of shows that like kind of kind of shows exactly his attitude towards black people, and it's very ironic. There's a lot of irony in the story because throughout the whole thing, he's like cussing and he's demeaning black people, yet he's really sexually attracted to them. So I thought that was really ironic. Um, that was the main thing there. Um, let's see. A lot of the story also talks about what it really means to be a good person. I think one of the quotes that I outlined here, it says, "And he was a good man, a God-fearing man, and he had tried to do his duty all his life." So I asked, is fearing God make you good necessarily? So that's a question that arises as well. Um, let's see. There's a lot of paranoia in this story. I put Jesse doesn't trust black people and can no longer cheat on his wife with them, just from what he says right at the bottom of the page. So he has a lot of paranoia, like he thinks black people are gonna like revolt and they're violent and stuff like that. So that was page one. This is page two. Right here, we got a couple things here. Um, let's see, we get an anaphoric here when he says hold her, hold her, hold her. And you also get a nice simile here, buried in her like a child, and never have to get up in the morning again when he's talking about being with his wife. A lot of dehumanization again, describing black people as animals. They were animals, using a metaphor. They were lived like animals. There's a simile. Um, let's see, get some hyperboles here. When he's talking about the whole tribe is pumping out kids, it looked like every damn 5 minutes. So that's a hyperbole right there. Um, some parallelisms here. Yes, sir, Mr. Jesse. I surely will. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. When they're talking about that. Um, let's see. I thought it was really interesting how his wife doesn't really care about his day because she's trying to sleep, but he feels the need to vent this what's on his mind. So let's see. It basically starts talking about protests and how, and it looks like what they're doing is civil disobedience because they're just standing outside. I think the courthouse, and they're just singing, and it's like it's really ironic because at one point they say the police say stop coming down to the courthouse and disrupting traffic and molesting the people and keeping us from our duties, and like basically they're making them look bad, and but what they're really doing is just trying to bring awareness to like the injustice that's going on, and I feel like that's very relevant today, but we won't get into that now. um, let's see. um, Okay, so then this one the ringleader, he calls him, this main guy that he pulls out of the crowd. He tries to get him to get the crowd to stop singing, and in this scene, I just thought it was such a prime example of civil disobedience. Where this guy, he's a true martyr for his cause, like he's just getting beaten brutally, and he's not telling them to stop, and he's basically he's not fighting back. So civil disobedience there. Here's page four, right there. Um, let's see. Okay, there's a lot of sun imagery in this story. The first bit right here, where it's talking about the sun beats down on both of them still and silent. So it feels very uncomfortable, like it's a hot sun, and that usually arises in uncomfortable situations. The sun, it's just a repeating symbol. Um, let's see. Basically, he's looking for this woman that he used to know back in the day. Get some similes and metaphors on this page. Um, let's see. I thought this scene was kind of creepy, or at least the guy was being, or Jesse was being kind of creepy when he was talking to the boy, and it seems like he's very bipolar because it's like he's talking to this boy 1 second, and then the boy gets him so mad that it says right here he wants to uh, burst, he wants to pistol whip the boy's head and burst it open like a melon. So that's a simile there. So it's like he goes from he goes from talking to this kid to wanting to beat the crud out of him. Uh, so then we go down here, the bottom of the page. Um, ooh, okay. I think this was a really important part too, where he says, "You're lucky we pump some white blood into you every once in a while. You're women." So there's so much in this story. Sex is so closely related to like hatred of black people, and it's a very grotesque concept. So let's see. They could help, but they are still black, and that's bad. Okay, and then this is. I also believe this was an important part where I outlined, and it says it had always contained an obscure comfort. Um, wait, hold on. It had always comfort. They were singing to God. So basically, I put in the margins, in the eyes of Jesse, black people are good because they sing to God for help, but they're still black, and that's bad in the eyes of Jesse. So there's a lot of conflict going on with Jesse in this story. And the question keeps arising: what does it really mean to be a good person? Here's page 5 right here. We got a few things on this. We get a let's see, a couple parallelisms here. It says blacker than their hearts, blacker than their skins. Um, let's see. Then okay, then we get I put a theme. What does it mean to be a man? And it says I outlined they had taught him what it meant to be a man. He looked to them for courage now. That part right there when he's talking about the older generation in his town. So it's very objective what it means to be a man, and I feel like this whole story is talking about how racism is like passed down through the generations, as we'll see later. So let's see, what is more important, family or racism? I put down that question because they were talking about how the older generation is like staying with their family because apparently the black people of the town are being unpredictable. Um, let's see, more paranoia about a revolt happening there on that page. Here's page 6 right here. A couple more things on this page. The black people of the town are described as soldiers during a war. So he's really paranoid that some kind of war is coming or uprising. Um, we got some personification of the past being described as being refusing to be forgotten, and it's being stubborn. Uh, let's see, I thought this was really interesting down here when he says they were soldiers fighting a war, but their relationship to each other was that of accomplices in a crime. So I think what he was trying to say there was like they're fighting this war, but black people are so untrustworthy, apparently, according to Jesse, that like they can't even trust each other, and they're disorganized in that way, which puts them at a disadvantage. Um, let's see, we get a couple more things, and then we go into a memory. He starts to go back in time. Um, let's see. This is page 7. Now this is where things get kind of interesting, where you meet his dad and his mom, and his dad seems to be like a really big racist, and his mom like they're driving by these people, and his dad basically insults them, and the mom was like, "Don't say that about them," and let's see, and we find out that Jesse has a black friend, which is kind of ironic because he grows up to be a racist. And this whole time he's like, "Well, I haven't seen my friend in a couple of days. I wonder what happened to him." And let's see, not trying to hide it. Okay, so he's like, "Where's my friend?" And at the bottom of the page, we get this really uncomfortable thing that happens. Basically, Jesse's parents they have sex and they don't really try to hide it, and Jesse's forced to listen to this. And I feel like it's very closely related to his like sexual feelings at the beginning of the story. Like I said in the beginning, the sex in this story is like closely related to like hatred and racism, and I feel like it's really like integrated in this guy. Like he associates sex with hate because his parents, maybe this is just my assumption, his parents are are racist, or at least his dad is, and his mom is like kind of accepting of it, like she's not as racist, and basically they're having sex, and like I don't know, these ideals are kind of like forming, like sex must mean hate, and these all these different associations with sex in the story. Um, let's see. So yeah, we get some interesting imagery there. Page 9, right here. This is the page. He's Okay. We get some more sun imagery here. The sun seems suddenly very hot. This is when something uncomfortable is gonna happen. Um, let's see. He knew. Okay. So there's a part where he's questioning, or he's not exactly questioning. He says he knows what he's feeling is right, quote unquote. But is it really right? Like he says he knows it's right, but is it really right? That's the question to ask. And what does it really mean to be a good person? Once again, that theme comes up. We get some parallelisms here. No one at the hold on, parallelism. There was no one at the windows, no one in the yard, no one sitting on the porches. Get a couple similes here. As warm as the sun, more sun imagery, like a dull fire against the white. Um, More dehumanization. Um, let's see. You look all right, said his father, and laughed. When they look at you, he's going to swear he throws his life away for nothing. Wouldn't be surprised if he don't come back to haunt you, and laughed again. So just treating black people as if they were lower than human. And his father seems really into this just by his facial features, which were kind of creepy. He said they were looking at something he could not see. His father's lips had a strange, cruel curve. He wet his lips from time to time and swallowed. So his dad is really into this, and like up until this point, like this kid, he doesn't really know if he's racist or not. I feel like that he has these conflicting ideals, but you'll see like a sudden shift after the torture scene that's coming up. Um, so here's page 10 right here. And on this page, um, let's see. I thought it was really interesting when it says, beneath them, invisible now, lay the town, and to the left, miles of trees, which led to high mountain range, which his ancestors had crossed in order to settle in this valley. So I was thinking to myself, why did they have to include that? So it might be because he comes from a foreign place too, like his ancestors had to migrate here. So maybe it kind of shows inherently like he's not as different as the black people in America, just because they're not all from America. So I thought maybe that's why they included that. Um, so then we see a lot of let's see, we see it goes back to the theme of like group influence, or how racism is inherited from generation to generation. Like they go on a picnic, and they seem really excited to go on this picnic. His family, his parents, and it's very casual to them. They're like, "Oh, we're going to a picnic. We're bringing food. It's going to be fun, but we're either going to this site to watch a black person be tortured to death, and that's pretty disgusting. But they see this as like as some kind of casual event, and they're excited for it. And the whole town, like all the white people in the town are there, and they're just like when Jesse arrives, they're all like, "Oh, you're so grown up now for being at this thing, this get together. Like we're so proud of you." And it's like up until that point, Jesse was like hating this race, or not hating it, but so conflicted about being racist. And there's some more. Let's see. Oh, they set this guy on fire, and it's really disgusting. And we get some really gruesome imagery here. Um, let's see. And I put he just or I circled this quote. He wanted to say something he did not know what, but nothing he said could have been heard. So there's this like constant thing of or repetitive theme of Jesse trying to like say what he feels, but like he just doesn't. Like he's kind of suppressing it, or he just doesn't know exactly what he feels. Um, and we get a couple similes there, some racist similes. Um, so that's page 10. Here's page 11. Got quite a lot going on here. Um, let's see. A couple parallelisms. Okay. So, but what would you ask his father? But his father was far away. Ooh, this was an interesting scene when he said, what did he do? Jesse wondered. What did the man do when he's referring to the black guy being burned and tortured? What did he do? But he could not ask his father. He was seated on his father's shoulders, and but his father was far away. So I thought that was really interesting since his father's physically there, but his father's so engrossed in what's going on, like he can't even talk to him. That's another theme of him not being able to express himself, and he's being influenced by this crowd. Um, so yeah, more influence imagery there. Um, let's see, a really interesting part right here where he says he turned his head a little and saw a field of faces. He watched his mother's face. Her eyes were very bright. Her mouth was open. She was more beautiful than he had ever seen her, and more strange, he began to feel a joy he had never felt before, which is kind of disgusting now. He watched the hanging, gleaming body, the most beautiful and terrible object, which is a paradox, he had ever seen till then. So it's like he was associating the event with his beautiful mom, so it's like this like disgusting imagery of someone being tortured, like coupled with with pleasure. So that's like that theme of pleasure and hatred towards black people being pressed together, and it relates to the beginning of the story where he can't get it up for sex unless he's thinking about like dehumanization and just that association that he has with sex and with pleasure. It always has to come with hate. Um, let's see, and then there's a shift. I put the shift that Jesse becomes racist fully. Um, when he starts to realize that he's never loved his father this much before, and let's see, what is the significance of are they fearful of them? Okay, and then we get this really uncomfortable imagery where they cut the genitals off of the black man, but they describe them as like meat, like they keep dehumanizing him, and basically they just cut everything off that he's burned. Like they can't even recognize his body anymore because he's been so burned and cut up. So it's like in order to I don't know, they had to dehumanize him before they could like kill him completely, before they could justify it, I feel. Um, so let's see. This is page 12, last page. And let's see. It was being rolled up by one of the father's friends, the chain which held it being rolled up. Whatever the fire had left undone. So basically, on this page, it was talking about the charred remains and how it's unrecognizable. And I feel that's like a physical manifestation of dehumanization. This guy literally doesn't look like a human anymore because he's been burned and cut. And let's see. And then they sit down and they eat like a picnic lunch, which is completely disgusting. And it just shows how casual it all becomes and how natural for the new generation, I guess, for racism to be like passed down, and how all this hatred that's been coupled with pleasure has really confused Jesse. And I guess that's why he can't figure out what's wrong with him in the beginning of the story. Like he had all this like conflict inside, like he didn't know what was right or wrong. um, so I put he must completely dehumanize them. He justifies a feeling. Okay, so then the very last couple lines, it talks about how he finally like looks at his wife and starts saying like like uh, do things to me like a black girl would do, and do things, or I'll do things to you like a black man would do. Like he has to. I feel like that's the culmination, like the final the final straw. Like he's finally accepted that. Okay, like he's kind of accepted the fact that being racist is right. Like I feel like before he was kind of conflicted, but like he had like after thinking about all these gruesome memories and all these current like memories that are happening with the protests and the peaceful protests, and him like beating this kid up until he bleeds. Like in order to completely justify all these things and not feel like a bad person, he has to dehumanize them. So in dehumanizing black people, he can finally overcome his basically his roadblock in his sexual relationship with his wife, and that just I feel represents the final culmination. Like he before he just didn't know if he was racist, now he knows he's racist, and it's completely right. So that's basically the whole story, and yeah, a lot of interesting themes going on there, and interesting story overall.